Okay. So hi, I'm Dan Kennedy, an analyst at 451 Research, part of S&P Market Intelligence. And I'm joined by Idan Plotnik from Apiiro and Jason Espone from C.H. Robinson. And this is kind of exciting. For those who know me, I conduct a lot of end user studies of large enterprises. And application security is always a needed skill set with enterprise teams. It's always rated like third or fourth in terms of most needed. It's a little unusual to get three AppSec experts in one room. And so I'm a little excited at the prospect, outside of a OWASP conference or something like that. Now, this discussion is largely going to be around application security posture management, or ASPM. And here at 451, we laid out a somewhat bold prediction earlier this year that ASPM is going to be the center of gravity that forms the base of a virtual platform for application security. There's a lot of discussion around platformization. And we're trying to get across an understanding that platforms are a lot more complicated than single vendor solutions. And so for application security, that involves using a lot of different tools, but needing some sort of centering agent for prioritization and correlation. And ASPM has been evolving for a while, from advancements in ASOC, application security orchestration and correlation, as well as aspects of software security supply chain management. So in our end user study on application security, and I talked about that a second ago, we keep hearing pain points around problems in prioritization, an overwhelming amount of scan results, lack of actionable reporting, lack of coordination and correlation between all these disparate tool sets, such as SAST, SCA, DAST, IAST. As I mentioned, we have three folks with fairly deep backgrounds in application security, and experience drives perspective. I've started 2 application security programs myself. Once led correction of 97,000 code vulnerabilities, one of my early projects in C++. I know Idan developed some strong opinions around the practice of AppSec while at Microsoft, following his UEBA company being acquired. And I know Jason once had to roll his own ASPM. My first question I'd put to you, and I'll start with Idan. I'd like to ask you to touch on your background in application security, and based on that background, how some of these reported pain points resonate with you personally.
Sure. Thank you, Daniel. Thank you very much. And also thanks for Jason. And here is rich background. I started my career as a software engineer at the IDF, but after that, of course, in the cybersecurity unit, but after that, I had my own consulting services company. So I provided services of security code review and threat models to enterprises in Israel and in the US. And back then, it wasn't a mature, market like it is today. But I saw 2 main problems, and I felt them personally at Microsoft after the acquisition of my previous startup. One is a lot of manual reviews. Manual reviews requires time, requires attention, requires like top-notch, I would say, people with knowledge that actually can interact with developers and ask them the right questions and help them and guide them. There is a contradiction between this manual process and the velocity of code that you want to deliver. This is problem number 1. The problem number 2 is that we had a lot of siloed tools. Each tool tested something different in our application attack surface, and then each tool created their own risk factors, which were siloed. So one, you got CVSS score 10 from tool A, B, C, and D in different scoring mechanisms. 2, in most cases, no one looked at all of these alerts as a whole on top of your software architecture, which created, again, a lot of confusion and a lot of noise, and AppSec people or leaders without the knowledge that we here have said, hey, let's fix everything. And then let's throw that on the developers, which created an antagonism between application security leaders and software development leaders, which is not a good thing because they need to collaborate to reduce the risk of the software together. So these are the things I think that I saw from my career and things that I felt at Microsoft, where I had to go through 150 questions in every release of saying, hey, did you add APIs that are sensitive, or you expose PII data, or you're using a new technology that we didn't vet it on? Of course, I said no, and no one validated that because it was based on self-attestation. And it was a huge problem because they slowed us down. That's it. I hope this makes sense, Daniel. I know that it makes sense to Jason.
It makes perfect sense to me. We once had a question at the end of the project management submission process that was, does your project require application security review? And that's all it said. So the project managers thought about it and sort of randomly picked yes or no. And they usually only picked yes once.
Yeah.
Deciding it was a mistake afterward. And you're absolutely right. These manual reviews always seemed a little bit performative to me. And the major problem we had was we had like 3 application security folks on the team and something like 800 developers. So the idea that we were going to peer review code was just an unscalable idea. And yet everyone seems to start in that place. Jason, I just want to ask you the same question, kind of touching on your background and some of the formative problems you've noticed in this space that have formed based on your experience.
Absolutely, Daniel. So first of all, thank you for having me, Idan and Daniel. Greatly appreciated. So I've been in the industry for almost 25 years now. Can't believe that is 25 years. So I started off as a Java developer way back when, like something similar to how Idan kind of emerged his career as a software engineer. So we all kind of started pretty much the same spot. But back then, again, like, you guys are kind of really pull a lot of words from my mouth. So we kind of really wallowed in the same noise of the security, right? So the producing a tremendous noise from the SAST, ACA, DAST, a lot of false positives, and it took a high toll on developers. I myself had to kind of really deal with those problems way back when I was developing my own code. So as I kind of work my way up and kind of almost 2/3 of my life, I kind of really lived and breathed with R&D engineers, software developers, and product leaders. So I think the critical piece for any given business is to improve the software delivery velocity. At the same time, not compromising your security challenges and security risks and vulnerabilities, right? And while there is a paradox, okay, so I want to release my product 4x, but at the same time, secure by design, secure by default. How do you really attain some of that? Like, so that is the very valid, and even that is a challenge even today. So I built few application security programs / DevSecOps programs in the past. Obviously now it's kind of more emerging on the DevSecOps mindset, so which is great to kind of really see as the developers and the SREs and operations teams kind of see security is a real vital and heart of the every stage of software development lifecycle that they need to really apply the security. So it's very nice thing that industry is kind of pivoting to more security first culture. However, having the consolidated or the correlated in the right way of doing things is kind of still a challenging aspect. I think that's where I had to build my own ASPM. I should have patented it. So I didn't do that. But anyway, jokes apart, I think that's where the board and then the C-level people, like, they're always wanting to understand, okay, what does the risk posture look like for my products, my company, right? I think that's where we had to kind of build homegrown in my previous company, but there was a little bit of a kludgy solution. However, so it was able to kind of deliver that the goal of having single pane of glass view. Okay, what is important? Based on some permutation combination, not necessarily only the CVS scores, but various other things. So definitely, I'm leaning towards. ASPM is the right way of doing things, especially kind of reducing the noise of the security vulnerabilities or security findings, at the same time enabling software delivery velocity for the engineers.
You raised so many great points in that response. Idan, you want to say something?
I want to say one thing, and I see it only in the last, I would say, 6 months. And Jason, I don't know where you are on this journey, but in the last 6 months, I see a theme of large enterprises like C.H. Robinson are asking us to become the SDLC system of record to provide automatic or real-time evidence for second line and third line of defense. So suddenly, because Apiiro sees the data from this, your ServiceNow and your scanners and your security reviews and your manual pen tests and bug bounty and security controls in runtime, like CSPM or WAF or things like that. Now, customers came to us and said, "Hey, I want to use Apiiro. It's great that you're an ASPM, provide my AppSec team looks and prioritize based on risk and not based on only CVSS score or EPSS or CAV or whatever. This is good, great. I paid you for that. Now I want you to become my SDLC system of record and provide me evidences in real time to reduce the time that my team needs to work manually and go all around to provide these evidences." So I'm just seeing a trend now. You know what? It's across, 20 plus customers. I'm not sure it's a trend yet, like statistically, but I see very, very large enterprises looking at ASPM not only as a platform that will, as Jason said, will correlate and deduplicate and help you prioritize and make sense of the data, because at the end of the day, application security is a data problem, and it's also for the risk management and not only application security.
Yeah. So if I can make a quick, it does. I mean, if I can make a quick comment, I think industry seem to kind of slowly pivoting to the SDLC system of record. Why? I think, to my perspective, is since I think the ASPM has already have the data of all that various different stages of your SDLC, like right from the design to planning to development to build and test and operate and monitor, it is kind of easy to probably pivot as a system of record because you already have the data that you need, but it's just that how you need to tailor based on the different company, different use cases. So I think, Idan, probably your observation in the industry making a lot of sense kind of pivoting into that.
A number of good points raised, and actually bleeds into my next question. I will make a note, though, Jason, you brought up something interesting. It's interesting to me that 3 former developers are then allergic to wasting developers' time in their AppSec roles. And I think we all know what it felt like to have someone dump a gigantic report over the side of the cubicle wall and say, "Hey, could you just fix these 800 things when you have time from this scan?" And it's like, and so it's interesting as DevSecOps has improved, we've automated a lot of pieces of this. And now the next step is, hey, only ask me to fix what's actually highly prioritized, highly relevant, highly material in terms of changes that are being made. Because if you think about it, if you ask someone to fix 2,000 things, that could be their entire year. So they're not working on features, they're not working on things that make their bonus bigger, they're instead cleaning up technical debt and code. And they don't want to do that. They're conscientious, but it's not where they want to spend their time. So sort of related to that, in that prioritization discussion, Don, you made a point to me in the past that it's less about CVEs or vulnerabilities and more about material changes. And you got into that with your system of record discussion. And we've heard similar arguments around prioritization, finding results that include findings in unreachable code and therefore a lower priority to fix, and potentially wasting developers' time. And of course, there are risks that aren't contained within CVEs. So I wonder if I can get you to elaborate on this idea of why tracking, and you started to do it a little bit already, why tracking material code changes is a really important shift in the way we approach application security.
Yeah, so I will tell you, I will take one step back and then I will answer your question. In Apiiro, we modeled there are three types of findings. I'm trying to generalize, okay? Type number one is vulnerability. Yeah, you have a CVE and it's known, and four types. One is vulnerability, that you have a CVE known. The second one is unknown, like malware in code in your open source dependency. It's a different technique to find things that are not SQL injection, but someone added a line when you execute the open source dependency, then it will send some fields in a data model to my command and control center. It's a malware. The third one is misconfigurations, which are relevant for secrets or IAC or stuff like that. And the last one is material changes. What I mean by material changes, I will give 3 examples. Okay, let's say that Jason is added a GenAI framework in Python to a code repo that is classified as high business impact. It's not a CVE, it's not misconfiguration, but adding a GenAI framework in Python to a code repo that is high business impact, it means that now you have an exit point to OpenAI or Hugging Face or others. Someone needs to review that, okay? So if you can codify what is material change, like for example, you changed the logic of the authentication through an API endpoint in your code. Again, the SAST, the DAST, the SCA, the secret scanner, no one will identify. So what we developed as the foundation of the Apiiro is a technology called DCA, Deep Code Analysis, that actually model code into an inventory and entities and the relationship between them. So for example, show me all my APIs, show me all my GenAI frameworks, my data models, my more and more software architecture and components, and then identify material business logic changes and say, oh, when there is a new API added to this code base, it's a material change, trigger a request for a review. So I'm not saying you need to focus only on material changes. You need to focus on all of the above, like vulnerabilities, malwares, misconfiguration, and material changes together. And when you can combine them and say, just a second, I saw a SQL injection on this API that was changed materially by Daniel, then I can combine the identification or attribution of code owner to a vulnerability. And 2, I can trigger the process even before a scanner starts to scan anything. And this is why I was saying you need to also focus on material changes in your risk prioritization, because if you changed all the serialization framework in your software architecture, this is a high risk change, and the risk score of the application might change regardless if you have a SQL injection or not. Does this make sense, Daniel?
It makes perfect sense. And adding a generative AI framework, I wonder if anyone's working on that these days.
By the way, this is a huge thing in Apiiro today, because when when we detect a new Gen AI framework, we can trigger a security review without asking anyone, and it's basically codify the policy in Apiiro, and it's a big thing for orgs at the development lifecycle, and not to wait until it will get to runtime and find it there through your, I don't know, CSPM or whatever tools that you are using.
You've solved my problem from 20 years ago. Does this project require application security review? I no longer have to ask yes or no. I know. Changing tact a little bit. Jason, you've implemented ASPM at least twice now. You mentioned having to roll your own, which sounded like quite an adventure. Now you're with a commercial offering. And I just kind of want to hear from you. In both organizations, what's driven that change? What were the key problems you and your team were trying to address through ASPM implementation?
Right. Great question, Dan. So back then, kind of going to tell a little bit of a historical story here, right? We've been in the industry for enough number of times. And back then, I think there is no concept of ASPM. Probably the application security may be orchestration and correlation, but the Gartner probably launched or coined this terminology maybe a couple of years ago, maybe, or somebody else, right? But from the organization perspective, as application security leader, interfacing board and executives, they always kind of wonder about, okay, how is, what risk I have, okay, what risk that company has, and what investment we need to mitigate that risk, which includes developer resource, right, or additional security coverage, or even refactoring your whole product design. So it can vary a number of things based on the use case. And then if stuff hits on the fan, okay, how soon I can recover, right? How soon you can bring my product back or kind of service back. I think being in the leadership position for quite some time already, this is probably the consistent theme or consistent question that the executives basically ask, right? So that's one of the reasons kind of this idea of having a single pane of glass view kind of incepted or in my previous organization, obviously, it took literally village to build that tool, but not as sophisticated as Idan was talking about his own baby. So, but I think that did its job in terms of kind of providing, what is the important problem to solve, right? So I come from the telecom and datacom background. But most of the time, I work with companies like Motorola, Agilent Technologies, and Keysight. So it's pretty much like the test and a high performance test and measurement companies. Those are. So they always kind of look at, okay, so I'm developing my 5G protocol. So what is the response from that? I'm building an autonomous vehicle testing solution, okay? What should I need to do? So that's where kind of having all these various different elements coming together and understand, okay, what is the critical problems to solve, okay? So, the CVSs or CAV or EPSs, like various different permutation. But one little piece was missing is the connection with code, right? So the delving deep into the code and kind of stitching or mending the code into your runtime environment, right? So basically the code to cloud, I would say, right? Or code to your deployment platforms. I think that is the huge thing that Apiiro is solving today, is to kind of have the DCA capabilities that Idan was talking about. So I think that kind of really delve deep into the code and kind of really stitching and mending that connection between various different elements into the SDLC and provide, okay, where the risk are, right? Is it because of the material change that somebody introduced, the Gen AI framework from manipulated Hugging Face download or something else? You know what I mean? So I think that is the distinct view of what I built on my own in the past. And I mean, obviously with my team, so now with the commercialized, so now with Apiiro like tools, so obviously bring in a lot of value, number one. And then number two is obviously, there's a commercial off the shelf, like that kind of really reduces your development cost, your support cost, and all that stuff. So instead of kind of building it's another homegrown ASPM, kind of having the right players and right partner for us to kind of really partner together and build the product along with that. But overall, I think ASPM as an industry is still not matured yet. There are various different twists that the players are kind of bringing into the industry, right? And everybody has their own twist. But I think over the course of next few years, I think this will emerge a lot. I think we'll see some great ROI for that. So I think that's probably the distinctions that I would lay out, Dan, if that makes sense.
It makes perfect sense to me. I wonder, Idan, could I get you to weigh in on what you heard from Jason and key sort of feature sets of ASPM?
Absolutely. I want to echo on what Jason said. First and foremost, what we are learning from so many customers, that every customer, and exactly what Jason said, every customer has their own requirements and their own processes and their own knowledge and their own interpretation of risk. And this is why you cannot have right now one ASPM fits all your needs. Two, without Jason's team, which is one of, I think based on even what my team is telling me, is that they have the best team in the industry by far, super, super technical. And it also reflects on us because it makes us better. And by feature request, by working with us on designing these requests and not just saying, hey, I want this feature. They actually can sit with us as engineers and make sure that what we're building fits their needs. And this is a huge, huge driver for us to be much better. I'm not talking about the complexity of scale and other stuff. Let's leave it aside. But as an industry, ASPM is so complex because it's not like cloud. Cloud is structured. You have the assets of the cloud and the relationship between them, and it's a structured world. In software, the software that Jason developed and his team, it's not only different from others, it's a different architecture, it's different processes, it's different tools, it's different methodologies, it's different risk policies. Everything is different. So this is why it's so hard to build an ASPM that will answer to all your requirements.
Absolutely. If I may quickly kind of add that on all the complexities that you mentioned, Idan, the last but not the least is the technology stacks that teams uses, right? So some teams uses Python and Django framework, and some uses C# and .NET framework. Some uses Golang and all that. So you think about every language works in a different way, and every framework is different. So kind of having the one size fits for all is probably $1 trillion problem to solve. It's not $1 billion.
I totally agree. And I want to say one last thing, that most of the ASPMs at the market right now are more on more providing an aggregation of the data without the foundation of your software inventory. And this is why we said from the early days, and today we support, I think, more than 2,000 different frameworks across 17 different languages. So we said, let's not be as every other ASPM that will connect to all your connectors and aggregate the data and show you nice graphs. Let's provide context from your own software architecture. And to do that, you need an accurate inventory. An accurate inventory, you need new technology to scan code. So this was our MO, our modus operandi from the beginning. Let's develop a new technology to scan the code and map the inventory and track the changes of top of the inventory, not all the changes, just the material one. And on top of that, we will take your SAST and DAST and secret scanning and manual pen test, and then we will have a good foundation to augment these findings on top of your software architecture, which will give you different prioritization, different remediation, different even prevention mechanisms, which will reflect to what Jason said, which is the most important thing. How do I increase my velocity while maintaining or reducing risk? Okay, because this is Jason's job. This is he's accountable for that. And I hope this makes sense, Daniel.
Makes perfect sense to me. I heard two great points. One, Idan, from you, that it's interesting. You know, I have a colleague who covers infrastructure as code security and container security and all those other pieces. I had a chance at those things at one point and said, I don't want to cover them. I want to cover application security. And here's why application security is different. There's no expected rule set. I'm not checking against the known good configuration. Every enterprise has unique challenges in AppSec. It's the art of the custom and dealing with that. And so it's interesting, as we sort of abstract and make infrastructure invisible, it's still infrastructure. And people don't always understand that, that I can sort of do a scan and check against known good things, and that's my IAC solution. Well, those IAC solutions are not AppSec solutions. And I make that point over and over again. Jason also raised another great point, which is it's being termed code to cloud, but it's essentially, and it's something we always struggled with. I found this problem. Which developers change led to this problem? How do I trace it back? Who's responsible for correcting this? And we spent so much time trying to figure out, okay, we have this problem. How do we get back to not only the team that's responsible for that code, but who specifically, you know, introduced this change and things like that. And I think that's a real key point in modern AppSec, that we're starting, Jason raised the point, we're starting to solve that problem.
So what, yes, and again, Jason raised, I think, one of the biggest problem, which is, I will say it in a different, it's the same thing, a different word, attribution of a risk to a code owner. And a code owner is not only the team leader or the project manager, because sometimes in large enterprises, you are managing 100 developers teams, or even like an external vendors that develop the code for you. So you need to know who is actually the one that wrote the logic of this code that leads to this risk or this vulnerability or material change or whatever. And without tracking the material changes, you cannot say, because you cannot say who is the code owner, because most of the other vendors are using like Git blame. And we all know that Git blame, if Jason wrote comment on my API, he's not the code owner. I am the code owner. I developed the logic. He just wrote a comment. And based on Git blame, he will be the last one that changed the line of code. And then I will open a ticket for him. And then I will send him a Slack message. And then I will create a cacophony in the organization of opening tickets and Slack messages or pull requests to the wrong developers. So it's a really, what Jason said is such, again, and only people with real world experience that face it on a daily basis, can understand what he said. This is a big challenge in our industry, okay? And last thing, promise, it ties back to MTTR, to mean time to remediation, because if your KPI, if Jason as a leader in the organization will say to his team, hey, I need you to reduce the mean time to remediation of critical and high risks in high business impact applications, they must find the code owner in a faster way. So I'm just saying everything is tied together.
You're absolutely right. I've been in situations in my own career where I get a code owner and it's the name of a managing director who manages 700 developers. And I always laugh because I'd come back and say, I know this person hasn't written a line of code in 5 or 10 years, and they're definitely not the code owner. They are the owner of the owner of the owner of the owner of the person who made the change, and I need to get to that person. And so
exactly. You might want to notify them as accountable for the risk, but you cannot assign them to fix the risk. And this is totally different thing.
Yep. And you're absolutely right about mean time to remediate. It is a slack area in the process that we can reduce the time of if we have the data. Who made the material change? And what you're describing, Git blame, is a funny picture, especially if Jason's comment was, hey, your API has a security issue, it's leaking data, and then he gets assigned the issue too. So I've seen some versions of that as well.
Right. I think the overall, the sense of ownership is important in the world of security, right? I mean, that's exactly what Idan was kind of trying to point out. And once we have the right accountability, right ownership, it's more of collaborative than bureaucratic, right? So because the security teams always perceived as naysayers for everything, right? But now with a clear visibility and accountability and ownership right in our hand, it is easy to kind of collaborate with the engineering team, the product team. Hey, okay, how can we help you to kind of really address this problem? As opposed to, okay, hey, you introduced this issue and therefore you get reprimanded. No, absolutely not. I think this kind of gives us a transparency of how we tackle the problem collaboratively. So I think both development team and operations and security working for the common goal. What is that common goal? Is to kind of develop secure product and deliver secure product, bring revenue to the company. That's it. Yeah. So that's, therefore I feel the tool which kind of provides the right level of visibility has greater scope.
Yeah, it's a great point, and a great point about defining your security team's goals, ultimately in terms of goals for the business, and then coming down to the tactical things we talk about. How many tickets, absolutely, resolving those tickets, and all those other pieces.
Absolutely, Dan.
It's interesting. We brought up generative AI before in terms of a library that someone will be implementing as a material change. But we also know that there's been a lot of discussions around generative AI type capabilities and application security. The key early areas were describing vulnerabilities, using Gen AI maybe to do that. Some of the more advanced things now are automated code remediation. So I brought up that 97,000 C and C++ vulnerabilities, one of my first AppSec projects. I don't think you'd approach a project like that anymore. I think that'd be, you'd probably wait until code remediation was there in terms of suggesting and applying changes. And I know, and I guess I'll start with you, Idan, I understand Apiiro works off a proprietary LLM in its threat modeling approach. So I guess, where do you see sort of, I'll call them Gen AI-like or type capabilities sort of fitting in AppSec? Where's most of the promise going to be?
So I would divide it into two buckets, okay? Bucket number one is because organizations are using Gen AI code assistant, then the number or the velocity of code is growing. I don't want to say exponentially. It's not being proven yet, but it's growing, and I think GitHub just released research on that. Without hiring more developers, de facto, the amount of code is growing with the same developers. So if you increase the amount of code, then you have more risks, more security and compliance risks in your code, and it creates the problem much bigger because your AppSec team still stayed the same because the number of developers does not change. So you are not getting any headcount for new AppSec engineers to review this code. So development velocity goes up, but the ability to review everything is not there. So this is one challenge. The second challenge, or I would say, call it govern the usage of AI in your company, okay? And get visibility. Like, how many of my developers are using Copilot to write code, and maybe I can put more policies on their code and make sure there are at least 2 code reviews for people that are using Copilot. So this is what I mean by saying govern these types of risks. The second risk is you as a software company using Gen AI embedded in your code that can interact with OpenAI or using your own models, which is a different attack surface. And there are so many, startups now that are dealing only on this piece. Does this make sense, the distinction between govern the usage of AI and what's the problem that it creates versus securing the usage of AI in your code? The distinction between them?
No, you absolutely have two different areas of issue. You're building your own Gen AI applications, which sometimes are just wrappers on what OpenAI is doing and everything else, but you want to observe that. But then you have this other issue of, if I'm the AppSec team and I already can't catch up to the issues that developers are creating, if I make developers 30% more efficient, I'm now raising the potential for error creation around 30%. So yeah, how do I, I'm already not caught up to the problem and developers are now producing more code with more issues. How do I deal with that?
Exactly. But this is
Jason,
my yeah.
No, it's fair. Jason, any thoughts on the same, either challenges generative AI creates or areas that it might improve in the application security space?
Absolutely, Dan. So I see that slightly differently. One, from the capability standpoint, the whole generative AI in general, I think we are probably in the hype cycle of AI, right? So every Tom, Dick, and Harry is talking about the AI, and then if they don't have AI in front of their product name, AI powered, LLM powered, and there's a perception that they can't sell their product anymore because there is no AI associated with that, right? However, I see that the generative AI capability would positively attribute for security. AppSec specifically. I mean, the generative transformers capability, obviously, that provides the remediation recommendation or the mitigation recommendation. Hey, how do I go and fix Log4j vulnerability on this particular package? Okay, so give me the steps. Or how do I update this Python Jose library? Okay, so did they provide the new update? All that stuff, like, it's probably kind of come handy for the developers, like those don't have a deeper security background. At the same time, it also kind of helps security engineers and security practitioners to effectively triage and also effectively introduce some code reviews systemically, okay? in every given PRs, okay, obviously the assumption is one of the team members review this, right? Okay, what if there's some human flaws, right? And obviously we can have the co-pilot or generative AI to kind of review the code. Hey, can you check if there is any security vulnerability on this particular code? How am I handling the memory of this particular code snippet, right? Do I have the memory heap properly, or input validations and all that stuff? So probably we could kind of use generative AI on that. And the last piece, I would really notch it up one step. Now, we are heading into agentic AI now, right? So the generative AI era is kind of now pivoting into agentic AI. Okay, what does that agent means, right? So Idan can create his own agent Idan AI, right? So for argument's sake, right? So that agent can autonomously make decision, review the code, approve the code, or even upgrade or update the security vulnerability. So it could be a massive game-changing opportunity for AppSec leaders, companies, startups like Apiiro and whatnot. So bringing agentic AI into it, it can do auto triage it, and in some cases even auto remediate it. So that's going to significantly improve developer velocity if you do it right. So then it also kind of comes with its own risk, as Idan mentioned in the past. Like when we introduce more agents, sometimes the agent can go rogue, right? So how do you really maintain the agent lifecycle management, right? How do you make sure agent runs on the updated lifecycle, updated model? How do you ensure the agent uses the right version of their language or the model, the packages, and all that data? So does the agent uses the right set of data to kind of catch it up on the industry? So it kind of one side on the rosy side, on the other side, there is always a risk. We as a security practitioners, we always kind of look at the dark side first and then kind of go on the rosy side, right? So that's what I see the whole AI, like especially generative AI, now agentic AI, playing a role in the security space, if that makes sense.
It does. You're suggesting security people have a predisposition towards the skeptical or negative side of the equation, and then.
I want to say I 100% with everything that Jason said. I want to say two things. One is that the problem with the AI as agents right now is that they don't have the context of your software or risk policy and runtime environment and tools and others. So it will get there, and we can have a different dedicated session on what we are working on in this area, okay? But yes, I totally agree with Jason that this is the direction. The second thing that Jason said, and I think this is a big, big concern for every customer that I'm talking to, is that they are saying, yes, we see tools that are doing automatic remediation for me through AI, but my developers does not trust that, and they need to take the accountability if something breaks on this. So it's a very complex situation where maybe we will use AI to help us fix stuff, but we'll still need the human to take accountability for that and review that before. So it will not be automatic, 100% automatic remediation.
So human in the loop will be a key part. Yeah, and we're not introducing an opportunity for developers to start blaming the AI.
Absolutely. Maybe, so it's kind of a tiny little flavor on what Idan mentioned. I think today, definitely we don't have the capability for AI to kind of autonomously fix everything by itself. But I see the horizon is not too far. So again, as part of this whole agentic lifecycle management, how much the supervised learning we provide, like, human in the loop, and kind of provide the up-to-date data, different use cases, and then possibly that will get into that. Even then, I'm not really expecting the agentic AI go and fix the problem in production. Probably lower environments, maybe in the devs and dev environment and staging or testing. That is where probably we will let agentic AI kind of do its job. If it works great, well, okay, this particular code snippet, your IAC or your CI/CD pipeline YAML file, or your C# or whatever the particular code snippet. Oh, this problem, this code fixes this particular risk, and therefore devs, okay, this is the recommendation. Go and apply that in your production, and then the real human kind of takes that into the production and do it. So I think that's how I envision the whole agentic AI will kind of shift the industry a little bit. Starting out with the lower environment and then kind of slowly pivoting into the productions.
Some great context, thank you. I think we have time for one more question, and we sort of alluded to it a little earlier in the conversation, but I'm talking about complexity, and ASPM attempts to make sense of an already complicated application security product space. Yet we're seeing other products like CNAPP attempt to address some areas of the application security equation, but they do it in kind of a light way, SCA light, kind of thing. How do you see this shaking out? Can platforms be successful if they're not willing to dig into the code context itself, which tends to be the really complicated part of application security? And I guess, Idan, I sort of already know your opinion on this, so I'll start with you.
I would love to hear Jason's point of view.
Go in that direction too. Sure.
Before me.
Sounds great.
Sure. Okay, so if you're putting me on the spot, I'm sure. Let me take that. I love challenges, right? I think. Let's kind of step back, right? The CNAPP to me and CNAPP and ASPM, although the both platforms are to aim to enhance the application security, I think these two has the distinct focus areas. Okay, what are those? Right, the CNAPP, it is mainly to focus on the cloud native applications, but many companies not necessarily 100% cloud. Right, and some companies so hybrid, and some are the governmental companies or the DoD contractors and whatnot, and they prefer to kind of have either private cloud or kind of really on-prem stuff. So in my previous company, we were one of the DoD contractors. We used to comply the ITARs and DFARs and all that compliances. So what that means, you need to have a separate data center and separate infrastructure for those applications. On that context, CNAPP wouldn't really kind of play much of a role, right? Although maybe there are some outposts which you can kind of connect with the on-prem Kubernetes clusters and stuff like that. But I think the CNAPP platforms produces a lot of value in runtimes, right? So more of the shipped rights, your container securities, your image security, or all that stuff. But there are great players in the industry, they are literally pivoting 200 miles an hour, bringing everything into the CNAPP platform. But I think that's where I see there is a distinction. And then also the CNAPP, they focus mainly on the infrastructure as a code scanning, like IAC's code, and then, some provide the runtime protection too. In the contrast, with the ASPM, you have the code context. If you do the ASPM right, you need to have the code context, right? That is where your product kind of gets written and then gets built and then deployed, and then that is when the CNAP comes on the right hand side. Like if you think about the DevSecOps, the infinity diagram, like on the CNAP kind of comes to the right hand side. But when we infuse the ASPM and CNAP, that is literally to me a nuclear effect that you can kind of really get a lot of context right from the code to all the way to your runtime stuff. And that's one of the things that we're exploring, as well, to kind of provide the end-to-end, the code to cloud or code to deployment environment. That's where I see kind of both ASPM and CNAP kind of plays a role. Again, long story short, the platforms that do not delve into the code context may miss the critical vulnerabilities inherent in the application code base. And obviously, therefore, integrating the code level analysis is imperative for comprehensive application security strategy, if that makes sense.
It does. Each has a role. Integration would be great, but they're doing different things. Idan, in the last 4 minutes we have, anything to add to that? Or
I want to say the same thing, but in a different words. I want to say that everything starts and ends from an inventory. The inventory of CNAP is understanding your cloud infrastructure. The inventory of ASPM is understanding your software architecture. And exactly what Jason said, augment or connect the runtime infrastructure or cloud infrastructure with your software architecture together. And this is a game changer. And you can actually attribute things from left to right and from right to left. And you have the power to view across, from design, development, build, deployment, and runtime. And this is the holy grail. But again, to keep it short, I would say CNAP understand your cloud architecture and ASPM understand your software architecture. And this is two different inventories that requires different technologies that needs to work together in some cases.
Very good. All right. Well, that brings us to the end of the hour. Jason, Idan, I want to say thank you. It's particularly exciting for me to have three ex-developers who are been trapped in application security for a couple of decades, compare notes. It doesn't happen very often, like I said at the outset of the call. So exciting call, and thank you for participating.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Yes. Yeah.
Thank you. Appreciate it.